Mohammed Syed is one of the co-founders of Ex-Muslims of North America. Mohammed, you're of course a friend. You used to hold to Islam. You're a believer in Allah and the Quran.
Yes, I was raised Muslim. My parents are Muslim. Until moving to America a few years after that, I started examining Islam a little more critically and realized that it was nothing more than ancient mythology after that.
So you are an Islamophobe. That's what you're telling me, right? You
Anybody
hate
that disagrees with
Muslims.
Islam tends to be an Islamophobe automatically by default.
I was talking to Muhammad Al Qadra about this, and we've spoken in the past.
Mhm.
We speak about Islam, the idea, the ideology, the religion, the claim or claims. And when you do that, one of the big defenses is you're a bigot, you're an Islamophobe. And he was saying, it's this is a non-thing. I don't know. Is there such a thing as Islamophobia, in your opinion?
So the word itself is not useful from my perspective. So there's bigotry against Muslims that exists as a group, and we need to work against that. But the issue is that a lot of people conflate Islam and Muslims deliberately. From a religious perspective, it makes perfect sense. If you're trying to defend a religion, what better way to do it than label anybody criticizing a religion as a bigot? So I understand why Muslims do it. But on the other hand, you also have a lot of people that are not Muslim, particularly on the political left, that are happy to go along with it, instead of simply saying that there are ideas and all ideas can be and should be criticized and all people should be defended regardless of what beliefs they hold.
So there's this progressive sort of, for lack of a better way of saying it, celebration of the hijab. You see major marketers and they're showing the Muslim woman wearing the hijab and they're like diversity, diversity, diversity. And people like Yasmin Mohammed and others, perhaps yourself, I don't know, are saying, stop celebrating a symbol of oppression. How do you stand on that one?
I agree with that. So everybody should have the right to do whatever they want, even if they are celebrating personally something horrible. Okay, fine. But an advertiser or a company or a political alignment that is doing that is doing something terrible, because a lot of people are oppressed by this. The whole point of the hijab is modesty. We're reducing women to their appearance. And that is something that feminists and women at large have fought for multiple centuries to pull away from, and to embrace that simply based on skin color to a great extent, I would say, is racism.
Now, we're seeing the death of nuance in this one, though, because we're not saying, like, I don't support a ban on the veil, but I just don't think this, especially given what it symbolizes in oppressive Islamic regimes, I don't think that people should be celebrating it in the name of diversity. But if you say that on Twitter, it gets totally lost and everybody tends to overstep, right?
Yeah, exactly. So to me, that's a failure of the modern political left to a great extent, where the Voltaire line about "I will defend to the death your right to say" something that I will spend my entire life opposing. It's the same sort of thing. I will defend everybody's right to wear the hijab, but that doesn't mean the hijab itself is good. Modesty doctrines are not good, period. Women should have the right to live the way they want, no matter what it is. And coming from a patriarchal religion, of course, it's an attempt to control women.
As the Saudi Arabia law is passed or changed so that women can now drive in Saudi Arabia. And I know that many are patting themselves on the head going, yes, victory. And of course, it is an important thing, an important step. But it doesn't negate all the crazy shit that's going around. Right? I mean, they're driving, but the culture they're driving around in is still pretty batshit crazy. I mean, you want to speak to that at all?
There's still, so you still need permission from your male guardian to be able to drive. So the state will allow you to drive if your husband/father/brother gives you permission. That isn't liberty in any way, shape, or form. You're still a second-class citizen. And that's just about driving, about moving away, about living the life you want to live, about, say, somebody wants to go to college and their parents don't want them to, or marry somebody they don't want to. None of that is an option for somebody that lives in those countries.
I didn't see that past the headline. Like, I would have, if I was a female in Saudi Arabia, I'd go to my husband or, I don't know, male guardian, for lack of
Yeah, exactly. It could be a brother, even a younger brother or a child as well.
And I have to say, hello, I would like to go to the store, to the movies. Or can you go to the movies in Saudi Arabia? Now, that's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
So, here in the 21st century, we are reading the headlines about someone being an adult being permission to get behind the wheel of a car. and I just have to shake my head. But progress is being made, and it
Sure, it's worth applauding the progress, but on the other hand, things are horrible beyond that. So put Saudi Arabia and Iran aside; those are extremely conservative governments. Even in other Muslim countries, be it Jordan, be it Pakistan, women are not equal citizens in 100 different ways, and most of those ways are inspired by religion. It's no different if you look at the West in the past, a few hundred years ago, religion was used to repress people in a variety of ways as dictated by the religious texts.
Is it true that in Saudi court, I know that in several Islamic nations, if you go to a court of law, if you have a male's testimony, it takes the testimony of two women to equal the male. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes, that is correct in many Muslim states. And that flows directly from the Quran. There's a verse in the Quran about testimony and women being, female testimony being worth half that of men.
All right, hang on. Let me come back, though, because, and one of the reasons we're speaking is before everybody, literally cuts their wrist because they're so freaking depressed about how back-assward all this stuff is. There are inroads being made, and there are sort of events being created so that we can go out and promote freedom from these harmful ideologies. And it speaks to a special event that you have coming up. So give us the specifics. What is it? Where is it? What do we do?
So it's on July 21st in New York. We're having an event with Ibn Warraq, Ali Rizvi, and myself. And it's about the rise of ex-Muslims globally, not just in America, but everywhere around the world, and how important Enlightenment values are for changing the minds of people. Ibn Warraq himself is, I would say, one of the foremost ex-Muslims around. He started writing in the 90s. He wrote a bestseller, Why I'm Not a Muslim, which covers the case against Islam. And this was like a decade or so before even Ayaan Hirsi Ali was out as an ex-Muslim. So it's wonderful to have him with us at that event. So if you're in New York, I would if anybody is in New York, to come out for that event. Ali Rizvi has a book, Atheist Muslim, where he talks about the interplay of culture and religion. And it's also a very compelling read. We're going to be talking about the Enlightenment itself in the sense that in the West, like what's going on right now, what happened today or over the past few weeks, we're sort of losing the ball on universalism, on human rights, on secularism, and we're pulling backwards. And coming from where I come from within the Muslim world, we're trying to achieve what people over here are rejecting. Free speech really isn't a thing in our part of the world, from a variety of ways. So I grew up in Pakistan. And the idea that individual rights are paramount is something that I couldn't have conceived before I moved to America. The idea generally was the state dictates what you're allowed or not allowed to do. The state is all powerful. When I moved here and read about the formation of America and the Constitution and the fact that all rights not specifically listed in the Constitution are with the people are all powerful, and they give certain rights to the government temporarily for certain purposes, was revolutionary.
I was talking to Muhammad Al-Qadri. I keep referring to this conversation, and I'd mentioned it on a podcast very recently. So he comes out of Jordan. He, at some point, fears for his life because he's an atheist in Jordan. Yeah. And he comes to a place where we have freedom of speech guaranteed by the Constitution. And then he sees us, free people, under the Constitution, who are either not using our voice to speak about the things that matter because it just doesn't matter to us. And that blows his mind. Or we're trying to police speech and quell free speech, which, coming from that Jordanian culture, from the Islamic culture, blows his mind. On both fronts, he's like, what's the matter with you people? I hope I'm not putting words in his mouth, but he was just shaking his head like, you have a freedom that people around the world have fought and died to try to get.
And failed to acquire.
Yeah.
Like, people in every single Muslim country have fought for this and lost the battle. You guys won. America has won. And I would say they've become complacent. Like, there's a certain level of, I would say, privilege where you become so used to the privilege you have that you don't even recognize how precious it is and how many people would literally die to get there.
Well, let's look at the flip side of that one. In the free speech culture that we live in here in the United States, we are seeing a rising noise, though, because in another way of looking at it, we're seeing sort of in the cage match, the Thunderdome of the Twitterverse, nonstop baiting and flaming and yelling and screaming and cussing everybody out, and you're awful and you're horrible and you're a Nazi and you're this and you're that. They're using their freedom of speech, but they're not necessarily part of the solution. I'm not saying that I'm not trying to speak out of both sides of my mouth, but again, in a nuanced conversation, we have to talk about free speech, but also effective speech, do we not?
Sure, but without free speech, you can't have effective speech because the boundaries of your speech will be limited before you even begin the conversation. So, if you look at Muslim countries, the conversation never starts with, say, the problems within Islam, or how do we eliminate religion from public discourse, or eliminate religion from government itself, separation of mosque and state. The concept is something that I had never heard of before. So, limiting speech is a way to eliminate the levels of progress you can actually achieve.
What's your take on the whole concept of deplatforming? Like, are there people out there, are there voices? Like, if there was an Islamic extremist who believed in jihad and death of the infidel, do you think that person should be, for lack of a better word, deplatformed?
Definitely not. So my perspective is that we should allow that to happen, but we should shine a spotlight on it. So, and this has happened in the US and Canada, where extremists have gone to speak on campuses, and we've let the campus know, particularly campus newspapers and stuff, that this person is coming, and they hold these views. And I would recommend that you go and attend them and cross-question them about these issues. And the thing is, the people that are inviting them may not be aware of how repugnant their views are, or people in the audience may not be aware, or they themselves have never been in a hostile environment where they're questioned vigorously about why they view certain lives as worth less than others. So having those conversations is great because it exposes extremism and it forces them to try to defend their position, which is an indefensible position to begin with.
Another angle to that is that who gets to determine which speech is heard and which is not? It seems like a hugely subjective thing, right? Who gets to determine what you and I get to hear in the free speech arena?
Exactly. So if you look at it from an ex-Muslim perspective, somebody that's been harmed by Islam, they can very easily make the case that Islam itself should not be allowed on campuses or should not be allowed to speak because a lot of it is very hateful. If you read the Quran, it's hate speech to a great extent. It calls us deaf, dumb, and blind, for example. It calls for a death. But by having those conversations, we can convince people this is a bad idea and pull them away. We shouldn't have the right to censor Islam. We shouldn't have the right to prevent Muslims from speaking simply because they adhere to a bad ideology.
The event that's coming up in New York is about speech. It's about the perspectives of people who have seen the religion of Islam from the inside, but more importantly, the people inside Islamic cultures. And we have to draw a circle around, again, the fact that most of the people who are oppressed by radical Islam are themselves Muslim. So being an ex-Muslim speaking out against Islam is not necessarily anti-Muslim, correct?
I would say it's pro-Muslim as you can possibly get. If somebody's mired in some sort of bad belief, superstition, anti-vaccination, whatever, if you're fighting to prevent them from falling into that or pull them out of those bad beliefs, are you hateful towards them, or do you have their best intentions to make their life better? Islam is superstition. It's a myth. Walking away from it improves everybody's life. There's nothing hateful about that. I would say it's the position of ultimate love to prevent people from falling into something that is false.
If I was anywhere near New York, my friend, I promise you I'd be there. I'm here in Oklahoma, and I'm not able to get off to the East Coast. But if somebody wants to participate, and I would encourage them at all costs possible, try to be there. Is there a website? Is there a Facebook page? Is there a resource? Where do they go?
If you go to our website, www.exmna.org, the main page has a link to the Eventbrite for purchasing tickets. I'll send you a link after the call so you can include it within the video if you want.
What's the date again?
July 21st.
July the 21st. And I'll include that link in the description box to make it easy for the viewers to check it out, support it. If you can't make it, share it. Share the link out there. Help us get this sucker viral. And, the folks at Ex-Muslims of North America, I'm a huge fan of you, Mohammed and Sarah Hayder, and I know that you deal with people every day who are really in the trenches doing some amazing and often, unpopular and even dangerous work to try to help apostates and those who are doubting and those who are trying to escape oppressive regimes and cultures and religious ideas. You are making a difference, Mohammed. So thank you, and we'll get the word out about the event in New York, okay?